Just like hot pot and hopscotch on the block, justice is best served when everybody gets a shot. This is Brunch and Budget, the show about personal finance and racial economic inclusion with your host, Pamela Capallet, a certified financial planner and accredited financial counselor here to take the bite out of your budget. Brunch and Budget is part of the Race and Wealth Podcast Network, recording live from where we reside, but also from the Prosperity Summit 2020.
Everybody, it's here!
Yeah, we're here, it's here, we're here to give it to you. I'm your sound provider, Dialect, and here is your host, Pamela Capallet.
Thank you, Dialect, and thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We're super excited to be here, and we cannot wait to talk about the topic today. So we're going to talk about how POC small business owners can create alternative work structures, and we have two experts here.
We should talk about how we got into this mess.
Oh, we should.
I think that's the interesting thing about it too, because this is great stuff that we want to talk about. It's a very exciting show. Dan was even saying earlier, like, we don't actually know a lot about this industry, so we're going to we're on the same place as everybody else listening. So we're totally excited to listen to all of these things.
Yes.
But like, how did this happen again?
Well, we were on a panel.
We do panels sometimes, y'all.
We were on a panel
with Fool's Fury. Thank you, Fool's Fury, with the Build Festival. It's a really great theater company out in the Bay Area. My show, The Museum of Dead Words, was supposed to be in that theater festival. Then, of course, everything going on, they went virtual. They had a panel.
Yes, it was on labor ethics and finance reform. We were on a panel with Daniel Park, and he just blew our minds. He started talking about workers' co-ops in particular, workers' cooperatives, and I've never heard of workers' cooperatives. I was like, what is that, and how can I make my business a workers' cooperative? And so we knew that we had to have the U.S. Federation of Workers' Cooperatives on the show, and then he also introduced us to Ajoke Williams, who we have from the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops, and then also Anh-Thu, Nguyen, the Director of Strategic Partnerships at the Democracy at Work Institute, two experts who will help us guide us through what we can do instead, right? Because we're really in a place right now where freelancing seems to be the default for a lot of people. A lot of POC are in situations where they want to freelance or they have to freelance, and I feel like workers' rights have been quickly getting eroded with this kind of status.
You know what's the funny thing about it? It's like the way that you framed it. It's like it used to be that freelancing was a worker's option, and now freelancing is an employer's option. Yeah. And I think since the game changed there, it's now put us in a position where we're all scrambling rather than even hustling. It's more scrambling than hustling.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you both for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yes, we're so excited to have you. And I think that we're all looking for what needs to change and what already exists that people don't know about that we can move into, right? Tell us a little bit about your background and why you're passionate about this work. So Ajoke, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Ajoke Williams. I'm the project manager of Gilded, which is a freelancer cooperative, and it's an initiative started by the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives. So Gilded was started as an analog to what is currently happening in Belgium and other European countries with Smart. Smart Co-op is a co-op developed also for freelancers, and it was created in order to provide freelancers with a benefit, a social security net that they typically don't have because of their status as not employees. So in a lot of European countries, if you're an employee, you get access to federal subsidized benefits such as healthcare, free healthcare access, help with your pension accounts, sick days, and also tax benefits. But freelancers don't get that. So what Smart does is they turn freelancers into employees for the duration of their contract. And in addition to that, they provide payment advances. So if you were a freelancer and you had a project that was going to last 3 months but only get paid at the end, Smart would divide your payments up into equal installments and pay you out in installments that way. So Gilded is trying to replicate that security net for U.S. workers here. Of course, there are some caveats, being that the U.S. doesn't have a national healthcare system, so we're working around that. And I come to this field mostly doing cooperative stuff in the DMV area, and also as a technologist, I mostly interface online platforms with social activism and movement work and see how tech can work for good.
I mean,
I have so many questions.
How do
I join?
I'm just thinking about how many times I really could have used, like, I feel like my income is more regular and understandable now than it was before. And there was those times where like you're getting those like $5,000 and $10,000 checks, and then there's like nothing forever because it's just like, here's the project thing, and then you're like, how am I? And then you do, budgeting that is ridiculous.
Yeah, and it's a lot to ask of anyone, and especially someone who's like, I actually just want to do the work. I just want to get paid to do the work that I'm doing. Why am I also the accountant and the bookkeeper and sending the invoices and chasing after people, and I have to manage my own health insurance, and I have to worry about retirement and all of this stuff.
Oh, and I have to remember that if that $10,000 check came in, that 3 of that is as taxes.
Yeah, exactly. And that's part of what Gilded tries to address. Like, we want to take the accounting and administrative burdens off the freelancer so that the freelancer can do their job and that they can advocate for themselves a bit more as well. Because, as a freelancer, you have to both you're selling your product, and then you have to be the middleman for yourself and your client, and to ask them the really hard questions about payment.
Yeah. And it's like, it's a responsibility that I feel like someone who's a freelancer, we're not told that explicitly. We kind of know it, and we're like, oh, I guess that's a thing that I'll just like learn how to do. But it also is a responsibility that shouldn't fall on someone who's just a maker or who just like really wants to do the service or make the product that they intended to do, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess the option shouldn't be either I have to do everything or I have to allow myself to be exploited.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Definitely.
I love that. And Anh-Thu, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you came into this work?
Sure. So my name is Anh-Thu Nguyen. I am with the Democracy at Work Institute. We are a spinoff from the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives. And in my role, I have supported the development of Radiate Consulting Cooperative, which is a cooperative franchise, cooperatives for specifically young immigrant graduates who are working in professional services. My background, both my parents were Vietnamese refugees, and so a lot of my work has focused on centering immigrant and refugee communities in the U.S., communities that have a lot of hustle and also a lot of struggle as well, with regards to lack of access to capital, with regards to all of the issues that come up with having an unstable immigration status or just economic status, generally speaking. So a lot of the work that I've focused on in the past has come with me to DAWI and really has kind of like come to fruition with the development of Radiate Consulting. So in short, what we do is that we bring together young professionals who work in places, whether it's think like bookkeeping, financial services. They're also freelancers, but it's creative in a different way. It's less like traditionally like folks working in the arts and more people who work in spaces like interpretation, admin, like project-based consulting work. Most of them are immigrants, so it's really immigrant-centered, especially and quite a few folks like have a past where they come from like mixed status backgrounds, so they've really had to hustle and struggle in order to be able to succeed and work together. And a lot of that like cooperative spirit and energy that comes from like that kind of youth organizing really comes into the economic space as well, where they're combining resources. And we see this a lot in immigrant communities, right? When people bring together resources in order to start a business. Spanish, they're called like, tandas, when people put together a pot of money. In Vietnamese, they're called DAWI, and a lot of African cultures, they're called susus. So like it's something that like has a real lineage and a real background, and now you're seeing folks doing it in the U.S. who have from that background as well, from immigrant backgrounds. And similar to Gilded, the idea is that people are able to do the work that they're great and talented at doing, but by pulling their resources together as a worker-owned agency, they can pay for people to provide back office services, to pay for insurance, like especially things like liability insurance, healthcare, things that, and like licenses, things that people don't necessarily think about when they start their own LLC, and then they realize, oh my God, it costs so much money to like pay for things like incorporation, liability insurance, like these things. But as a group of people, they can pull their resources together to make this happen while still going out, getting contracts, using like the same brand to market their services under, and then also get support with regards to their taxes and just like navigating the minefield of running a small business business in the U.S.
Yeah. Whew. Oh my God. You're just like giving me flashbacks about setting up my company. And like all of the pitfall, and I'm a financial planner who has talked people through setting this up. And when you do it yourself, I feel like that you realize how many ways it could go wrong and how expensive it really is to actually start something up, right? There's so many like, rags to riches stories of people who are like, I started with nothing. I started with the shirt on my back. But the reality is there are so many costs and so many administrative things that it takes to actually be a successful business that it's so difficult to like get past that first year, get past those first 2 years.
Yeah, well, and the rags to riches story is the thing that kind of gets the stars in your eyes.
Yeah.
As Pam was flashing back to her own business, I was flashing back my early days as a creative, where I'm at the rap shows with the other rappers. I remember this open mic. It's like all friends of ours. We'd all go jam. We all love each other, help each other move and stuff like that. And we tried several times to make an album together with all like 20 or 30 of us. And we're like, we'll do it together. It's a co-sign together, cooperative effort. And everybody had their own stars in their eyes, rags to riches idea that they would do it themselves. And we were unable to pull that off, even though logistically that would have made life so much easier.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start with what a worker cooperative is. What is a worker cooperative? How do they work? And what are the pros and cons?
So a worker cooperative is like a business entity. In some states, there's a legal formation that you can take. In other states, there aren't. So you write the provisions into your bylaws. But the essence of it is where the workers own the company. They have ownership in the company. They also have governance in the top. So similar to how a shareholder in a business would have power in terms of like how money spent, investors would have power in terms of some of the decisions that the boards make. Instead of giving the power to people who invest capital, you give power to people who invest labor. And so it's all about making sure that disconnect that generally happens in capitalism, where capital talks more than actually the people who produce what makes capital possible. Labor is the origin for a worker co-op.
So basically with worker co-ops then, I just want to dig into the structure of it a little bit. So are the people who form the workers co-op, can any group of people come together and decide they want to do workers co-op? And then they're owners, and then they're also employees?
Yep. So one part is like, so if you form a worker co-op, you can form a worker co-op in different different legal entities. So you can have a nonprofit worker co-op, you can have an LLC worker co-op, which is what 88 is. And these different formations fit whatever you're trying to do. They should correspond to your business. And all that's actually needed is just provisions in your bylaws that tell what are the guidelines for someone being a member, what are their responsibilities when they're a member, what are they entitled to in terms of the equity and economic value that they get from the business as a member. And Anh-Thu can talk more if there's more you want to add to that.
Yeah, I would break it down to two components. One is agency and the other is ownership. And that's what makes a worker cooperative business different from other businesses. So for example, you see like all these like hotshot tech startups where people have equity, right? But they don't actually have control. You might have shares, you might vest, but it's still like Mark Zuckerberg owns and runs the operation, and you have no say over like what terrible policies are going to be enacted next. Whereas like a worker cooperative, the idea is that you both have like ownership, you have a stake, you get to profit share, and you get this decision-making authority. And so it's a democratic workplace. And the idea is that there's one worker, for every worker, there's one vote. And that can take a lot of different forms, right? Because democracy can take lots of different forms. So you have some small co-ops that are just like run like a straight collective that I think as artists and creatives, you might be familiar with in the past, where it's like we sit in a room, we just figure it out. And then there's like huge, like really well-known worker cooperative businesses. Well, they're well-known in the cooperative space. So the biggest one in the country actually is based here in New York City. It's called Cooperative Home Care Associates. And it is a home care cooperative business with about 2,000 people working there. Like 98% minority women own and led. But what makes sense, it's a big company. What they do is that they, the worker owners themselves vote for a board of directors, and the board of directors makes like the management decisions in terms of like hiring people from within the company to like take different positions of leadership. So it's like more representative democracy as opposed to like a direct, collective affair. So yeah, that's kind of the major components. And then of course, like the sharing of profits, or in co-op, it's called surplus. So if there's like a surplus at the end of the year after, you've paid people people's wages, you paid for overhead, etc. That money comes back to you as the worker owner in the form of like a bonus check, basically.
Now, when you talk about the larger ones and the kind of representative democracy of it, when you talked about Zuckerberg, it had me thinking about, well, if I own stock, I get to like make a proxy vote.
Yeah.
Is that like the same kind of thing? I wanted to know, is it a similar type of vibe, or is it a little more granular? Do you feel like even with the huge ones, like the CHA that you're talking about, does this one vote feel like it counts? Or are you allowed to vote on things that aren't just like voting for the board?
Ajoke, you wanna?
Yeah. So I'm not as familiar with like what the CHCA,
yeah.
What their bylaws say, but this is something that you would write into your bylaws. So what do your members have a right to vote? If they have a right to vote on the board, or there's certain topics of the board that you need membership approval in addition to the board. So maybe a majority of the board and a majority of your members have to say, yes, we're going to change the pricing or house cleaning before that actually gets passed. So you have to change the allowance accounts that we give all of our members if they need to buy surplus supplies. So it is very much dependent on what's in the bylaws. In addition, even if it's not in the bylaws, if there are provisions for members to change the bylaws, then it doesn't have to be explicitly.
Yeah, and another thing to your point about like whether it's a different vibe from like a startup or a company. Someone like Zuckerberg owns like 50,000, let's say, 50% of the shares, or however many percentage of the shares. And so that means he has disproportionate voting power. The idea of a worker cooperative is that like regardless of how much you make and like your surplus, their profit share is based on how much you work, or like, what position you're in. If you've been working with a company for like 15 years and you've moved up versus what if you just started, there's still the idea of like one worker, one vote when it comes to major decision-making authority. So in like a traditional corporation, you might have outside shareholders, like, just like randos who like private equity firms that own a significant percentage of the company, or you have internal shareholders, founders who have like a lot of power because they own a lot of the shares. In a worker cooperative, regardless of who the person is, people might be getting paid different amounts of money based on their skills and how much they work, but when it comes to like the actual voting power, it's still the same. So that's what makes it democratic.
Got you.
Yeah.
So really, like, and I'm also wondering too, like, does that mean, for instance, like, let's say there's a back-end person or an HR person or an admin person, they would also come in as a member and get an equal vote to someone who's like going out there and making sales, or to someone who's going out there and like directly working with
Like it
the
doesn't
client.
matter the department.
Doesn't matter the department, the position, anything.
Exactly. Yeah, it won't matter, but they'd have to fulfill the requirements of membership. And that wouldn't be dependent on in their worker co-op, that wouldn't be dependent on what they do as an employee, more so like have they worked at the co-op enough. Sometimes there are time limits. You need to put in so many hours before you can apply to be a member. You have to take these trainings, such and such.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, because when you talk about like creative collectives, I've done theater things where the creative people are doing like the majority of the putting things together and the promo and things like that. And then they have like what you would call a regular contractor that's basically a part of the team, but they're not involved in the genesis or a lot of the pushing of it. They just kind of do their part. So they have our agreement is that they have something different that they're doing and what they can vote on and decisions they can make. So that makes sense.
Ooh, all right, let's go to a song, because I'm like digesting all this right now.
Yeah, it's a lot. Let's jump to a song. Let's see what we got here. I want to go to Chicago. Let's go to Chicago, Illinois for Liberty Jones with her joint Better Together, because that's what we're talking about, how we work better together. Back in a minute. We're doing this Brunch and Budget, part of the Race and Wealth Podcast Network. Check in a second.
If we divide, we must learn.
And we're back. Bunch of Budget, Waste and Wealth Podcast Network. That was Better Together by Liberty Jones from her album Peacemaker.
Okay, so we are talking with Ajoke Williams of U.S. Federation for Worker Cooperatives and Anh-Thu Nguyen, the Director of Strategic Partnerships at the Democracy Work Institute. We are talking about worker cooperatives and really just thinking about how we can structure work differently for people so that they have a voice, right? So they can advocate for themselves and so they can access benefits that everyone should really have access to.
So we're not only talking about how it's better together, but these guys are helping us figure out how to make together better.
I love it. So worker cooperatives sound like a dream, but I'm sure there are some issues that come up. So I'd love to know what the pros and cons are for joining a workers cooperative and why someone would choose to do it or not do it.
I can start. So some of the pros would be you get help in decision making as you form your worker cooperative. So you wouldn't have to, it wouldn't be one individual that's responsible for figuring out how the structures in the system. You'd have a team that's already committed and already invested in the cooperative and in the organization. It's also a good way to get initial funds for equity into the cooperative. So become a member, you actually have to put in money. So you have all of the initial founders of your cooperative put in some money for equity to get the business started. Cons would be that they're still not as well known in the States as they are internationally. So it's harder to go to banks and explain the structure and explain who has ownership and who's taking out the loan. Banks typically are used to seeing 1 to 2 people who have primary ownership of a business, but we have all these different members who have ownership. And then in addition to having a worker co-op helps lessen the burden of responsibility, especially smaller co-op, you have decision making coming to direct democracy, coming just members. It also means it's a slower process to some degree. You have to figure out what is your consensus strategy. What do you do when there isn't consensus? And in my opinion, that makes for better decisions, but the timeline's a bit longer than if you just had one person laying down the law and everyone else has to follow.
Wow. It's okay if this is more complicated, you can tell me so, but is there a best practice for when you go into a bank and you're like, there's a bunch of us?
Yeah.
Typically what the Federation did for COVID, because a lot of the PPP loans were given out through banks, is that we collected information from our members and we said, which banks did you use? How difficult was the process? And we have documents for that on our website that people can refer to, but a good place to start would be checking out the bank site, see if if they have any familiarity with dealing with cooperative businesses, because if they don't, you're going to be the person to educate them. So it's better to start with a bank that already knows. And a lot of CDFIs or smaller lenders.
Yeah, definitely echoing Ajoke's point on that. There's some banks that are pretty familiar with the worker cooperative model and so are a lot easier to deal with if you want to open an account. So one example is Amalgamated Bank here in New York City, which is also a B Corp. So they're great to work with.
They're Brooklyn Bank.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, we love them.
Yeah, so they're
and
good.
Shared Capital, just to shout them out.
Yeah, Shared Capital Cooperative is great.
Nice.
Other times, what I've done in the past, and I've actually opened bank accounts on behalf of worker co-ops, is just you just go in as an agent. Basically, you're like, I am opening this on the behalf of all of these worker owners, and you have the articles of incorporation and everything like that. But then it definitely can be complicated because especially at some of the bigger banks, they're like, what is this? Why do you have 15 owners? This is and I don't get it, and it can be complicated to navigate. So finding banks that really understand the worker co-op model is really important, especially because Ajoke said, it's not really well known. And then related to that, in addition to the issue with opening up bank accounts, like Ajoke said, getting loans, the access to capital aspect is can be hard, because there's a lack of understanding of how the worker co-op model is, and because you can't raise capital in necessarily the traditional way, which is I have shares, so I will give 25% to some random person person in exchange for money, like going to a VC. You can't go to a VC in that traditional way to like raise rounds of funding. There are different creative ways that bigger worker cooperatives, like for example Equal Exchange, which does coffee, fair trade bananas, and chocolate, amongst other things, they've been able to raise money through direct public offerings, and then some other ways to raise capital, but it's still pretty limited, and that's it's something that definitely needs to be addressed to get worker co-ops in this country to the scale that we'd like to see it.
Yeah, because I've been thinking about like the bank account situation in particular, and I love that there are banks like Amalgamated that do that stuff too, because I think that this feels like something that we need to see more of. This feels like something that, because of the way that work is going, we talked about at the beginning of the show, that so many people are really like striking out on their own and trying to figure out how to do this, but you don't have to do, you can do the work part, in your own way. But I feel like this feels like the best of both worlds, right? There's this feeling of like, okay, I can work how I want to, when I want to, I have ownership in something, but also I have all this back end stuff taken care of. Someone is going in and being the HR person. Someone is going in and handling the bank account. Someone is going in and like doing the accounting and the books and things like that. And like the pooling of resources just feels, I don't know, it just feels like a really great safety net that so many freelancers don't have. I
don't even know if the word is safety net. I think phrase is safety net. I think community, at least.
Yeah.
Having folks. I hear so many times from freelancers and even small businesses where it's just 2 or 3 people, where they're like, it feels like there's nobody to bounce things off of, and I'm just in here in my mess, and when things are tough, it's so tough. And I really appreciate when I ask you guys about like what are your best practices with these banks, is to say go to the banks that are already rocking with you.
Yeah.
We also, as freelancers, especially as creative freelancers, we're like, reinvent all the wheels. We always have to, because we always were told that we're pushing rocks uphill, so we just take that on and we're like, we're going to do that. But yeah, work with the people who already are doing it and help grow those things rather than trying to fight every time.
Yeah, I love it. That's so amazing. So I'd love to circle back onto your work in terms of working with immigrants specifically, because you're so right. I mean, I moved here from the Philippines when I was 2 years old. My parents are immigrants. I'm the children of immigrants. And I feel like, I know with my parents in particular, there was this fear. I worked myself up for months to tell them that I was going to quit my stable job with health insurance to start my own business. And who knows what's going to happen, right? And so I feel like that, I think a lot of the issues that immigrants face is not understanding the system, not being from here, and also just like the mixed documentation status that you mentioned, like how can they empower themselves?
Right, totally. I mean, what's funny about the immigrant experience in the U.S., at least like for my family, is that entrepreneurship is something that happens out of necessity. It's not like, it's like, if you can get a job that gives you good benefits, please keep that job. It's very hard to start and run your own small business. We didn't want to do it, but we opened a business. Like my family started a business. My parents were dental technicians. They were not dental technicians in Vietnam. Just teeth became the thing when they came over here. But they started their business out of pure necessity. No place was going to hire them. No place would accept their degrees. For my mother, who was a doctor in Vietnam, her English just wasn't good enough for her to be accepted into residency programs, even though she had passed her equivalency exams and all that stuff. So she ended up making teeth, and then later on worked in a factory. So yeah, the idea of like me, her only child, going off to get involved in like startups and be in a very precarious, I worked in a few projects where I did not have health insurance, and things are quite precarious for a while until I landed at a startup, which ended up paying me well. It's definitely a lot of immigrants are like, don't do it if you have to. And yet at the same time, it provides a major opportunity, especially if you're locked out of having a good job or even a job to begin with, right? Like entrepreneurship is the way that a lot of immigrants are able to find work in the U.S. and to take care of themselves and their families. And in the worker cooperative space, which up until around like 20 years ago, a lot of it was associated, even though there's a long history of worker co-ops being like a way for being a means for Black liberation and for worker organizing in the 19th and early 20th centuries. By the mid late 20th century, it became associated with like basically white hippies, middle class hippies, like kind of like you think like the crunchy co-op kind of when you think of that.
Yeah.
But in the last 20 years, like worker co-ops have become a major vehicle for contingent workers who, like freelancers, you know, gig workers in cleaners, construction workers, et cetera, in the gig economy, to be able to organize themselves, get benefits, get paid better, and be able to like advocate for their rights as business owners and as workers. And that's like really informed our work as organizations and at DAWI in working with like the next generation, with like young professionals, with freelancers who are seeing like the same problems that they have, that their parents had as like small business owners, or as like, you know, gig economy workers, where it's like, I don't have protections. I'm not able to access like, you know, building wealth in this economy like people who are born in this country, or people who have a measure of privilege. Like I going back to your kind of what you're talking earlier about rags to riches, most of those rags to riches stories are bullshit for the most part. Like, let's be honest. It's just like, what was it? Mitt Romney being like, I had to eat dinner on a folding card table in college. And it's like, your dad was the governor of Michigan and the head executive of an automobile company.
I didn't even know
he gave to you.
He tried it.
Wow.
There's a lot of like myth making about how people were able to, or, you know, even Mark Zuckerberg, right? He had a lot of privilege, and he started Facebook, but he still had a lot of privilege beforehand. So like the co-op structure, I think, is like really a way for people to use something that's like pretty familiar. Like, you know, in a variety of immigrant communities, people are already working together through pitching in through lending circles or just mutual aid and caregiving and so forth. And then being able to be like, you can also apply this to your business, and that gives it the kind of safety net that, or whatever you want to call it, so that you're able to like, you know, do what you want and achieve the American dream that, you know, you came here for, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean,
well, I really wanted to highlight for you, Gumbin, like, that's really dope how you mentioned how this is marketed as a crunchy white middle class hippie thing, just like Occupy Wall Street, just like the actual hippie movement, just like they're actually doing today with Black Lives Matter as a movement. That's like a constant thing they do, is say, hey, these tools of liberation for people of color, you don't actually want that. It's actually the laziest type of white person that we can invent who does that, and they're doing that to mess with you. It's always a running theme with these.
Yeah. Oh my God, it's so true. Yeah. Well, and I just think about the idea of like collectively pooling your resources is something that's so frowned upon in this country, right? The idea of saying like, oh, we're going to, even just the idea of susu, anytime I explain it to someone, they're like, wait, I don't get it. Can you explain it again? What do you mean? I like put my money, and then someone gets the money first, and it's this whole foreign concept in this country.
The thing about it is like, when we talk to folks, a lot of times it's they can't tell the difference between a susu and a pyramid scheme.
Yep.
And it's because the susu does not create a winner. It doesn't have a situation where if you are better or you are deemed more worthy, you will get the thing, you will rise up. No, it's about us collectively having something together, and they often get tricked into the susu because the susu goes, I'm not the susu, the pyramid schemes, they're like, it's like a susu except you get to win.
Yeah, exactly.
I think just jumping in on that, that's part of what makes cooperatives so powerful, in that you build that feeling of community. So shared profit, shared risk. You know, in typical companies, you only get the risk, right? So if the company's not doing well, then your salary gets cut and people get fired. But if it's one vote, one person, one vote, then you get to make those decisions, like what's happening when we're not prospering. What do we need to cut back on? What can we do? And similarly, just to jump on a really good point that I think Anh-Thu made about immigrants using entrepreneurship as a way to circumvent being discriminated against.
Mm-hmm.
What's actually missing is just that sense of stability, because a lot in the white communities, or more privileged communities, what they end up doing is using entrepreneurship as a way to move up in the social ladder. Mm-hmm. So they work at a stable company for a while, they develop the expertise, they get the clientele, and then all of a sudden they're a consultant, they're a private firm, but it's not as possible for immigrants. And so things like Radiate, what they do is kind of provide that stability that's needed to make that transition. So you're not taking just any job where you can't get professionalized skills, you can't just build on what you're learning, but you can, be a bit more strategic and kind of start to build a career using a platform that's already built for you, so you don't have to do all of that.
Oh, God,
yeah,
that's so nice.
Yeah,
and also to add to that, is mostly that part of that cooperatives and freelancers are kind of dual-pronged in terms of fighting against capitalism, because freelancing is a way to reclaim your work in a way, and what typically happened is, like, after the Treaty of Detroit, where there were lots of the strikes and people went to the big three motor companies and said, look, you need to start giving us more security and then we will trade our labor. And then they started eating back at that after the 40s. Freelance is the way to say, we actually, we used to own our labor before there were large corporations, and we would like to own it again, and we would like to own our time, and now we're back to fight for it. Well, if we want to own our time, then we need to make sure we have all of the security that we need in order to do that well.
Yes.
So okay. Because the thing is,
gems.
well, because I mean, great gems, but also you said some real stuff about working together, two-pronged attack, fighting against capitalism, and I figure since we're talking about reclaiming, you're saying workers reclaiming the stuff that has been poached from us, then we should talk about the elephants in the room. So when we talk about this, like fighting capitalism and the workers own, the workers get. What do you say when folks start getting scared about socialism and communism? Because I feel like that after a lot of the stuff that you just said, people will come out with that or be worried about those things. So what do we say when we talk about that? And I know that that's like its own whole nother thing.
We use the language of shared capitalism, which is or inclusive capitalism. Like, why should it be an aristocracy of like 5 people who own everything? And what does it mean to have entrepreneurship and ownership available to all people? Like, it's a business, it's still making money. The difference is that you're, focusing on making it accessible to everybody and supporting your community that way. It's definitely, people can get triggered by, they're like, oh yeah, it does, you're right. It sounds like socialism. It's like, no, it's business. It's just, now it's accessible to everybody.
Ooh, that's cold. I love that. It's business. It's now accessible to everybody. Shared capitalism. We've long said on this show that when people talk about zero-sum capitalism, the problem with zero-sum capitalism is that it does capitalism wrong. And that capitalism, when done well, as a hip-hopper, I liken it to a rap cipher. It's a thing where it's a circle thing where it's not about me having the best and having everything. It's about me having something that I can share with another, that we all create something together. And it can be competitive. And we can have markets. And we can have money that we're trying to get better at, and I'll sell you my thing, you sell me yours, and we can do all the capitalism stuff without the exploitation.
Yeah, I want to circle back to the phrase freelancing is a way to reclaim your worth.
Yeah.
And I think that we've been so beaten down with the idea of, I just have to accept what the boss gives me, I just have to accept what the company gives me, and even with the gig economy and the gig work, I just have to accept what these big companies give me because this is all there is. And to think of freelancing as something and bring it back to something that truly is empowering, right? Where you do have choice, but you also have these benefits that all workers should honestly have at the end of the day. And I think that's super powerful. Are you going to sound?
No, well, after this, what it is.
Oh.
You see the set now.
Oh, yeah.
Right, yeah, I want to hear.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that is something that we seeing how freelancers have been so taken advantage of in the last couple years, in particular, I'd say in the last decade, how do we reclaim that? And it feels like worker co-ops is the way to do that, right?
Yeah.
I'd also say that there's a bit, in my opinion, of misleaning against what we have now. And I wouldn't say we actually even have true capitalism. We have monopolies.
Yes,
When people get to the stage where they have enough money, they start to gobble up every single competitor, even people who make innovative ideas. You've heard stories. Just look at Google, for example. Like, there are lots of examples in the tech industry and manufacturing of companies doing the exact opposite of what they claim capitalism is. Mm-hmm. And so worker cooperatives actually, if you're going to do capitalism responsibly, in that you do want continued growth, then you don't want to destroy the environment. You don't want to destroy the community from which your money is coming from. Yes. You want to invest in it, like all the stuff that you actually need for a sincere capitalist society. Worker cooperatives would give you in a sustainable way. But what we have right now isn't that. It's hoarding money and calling it capitalism because a couple of people get to the top.
Ooh.
No, yeah, that's the real right
that's
there.
The mic drop right
Well, yeah, no, that's amazing. I mean, it's a reminder that things like, Tesla is an example not of capitalism doing well, but capitalism failing because, it stifled an entire innovative industry for like 100 years.
Yep.
That's fantastic stuff. Let's go to a song. So I feel you. So let's get out of the country. We're going to Santo Tomé, Argentina for a hip hop collective called Cooperativa DBA and their joint Politics. And we'll be back in a second. Brunch and Budget, all part of the Peace and Wealth Podcast Network.
Esto es de Villa de Lina para la gente de arriba que no nos quiere ver progresar. Políticos corruptos disimulan despilfarro. Lo veo y me dan ganas de matarlo. Te prometen tantas cosas como que si después te dan algo. Te buscan para las elecciones, luego desaparecen dejando a la gente retirada. Pusiste policías en todos los barrios cuando el ortiva en un blanco anda sobornando, golpeando a los pibes, torsionando con los narcos, arreglando para que no quede preso. Así quieren progreso sabiendo que hay gente que para comer no tiene un peso. Dejate de joder a mi gente, no broches. Estás queriendo ver cómo puedes hacer para robarte todo, hacernos causa a nosotros de cualquier modo. Para ustedes somos ratas. Después quieren salir a hablar de plata, son todos unos gargas. Dicen tampoco tengo mientras pasean en coches de primera. No voy a parar, yo les vengo a gatillar palabras que lo bajan sonando como un AK. Siendo directo, honesto, les presento mi dialecto. Atento a esto, abogado encaminado a hacer un doctorado con sus soldados al lado, postulado. Comunistas radicales, peronistas, socialistas, el presidente y sus críticas podridos de política. Dejate de joder a mi gente, no broches. Estás queriendo ver cómo puedes hacer para robarte todo, hacernos causa a nosotros de cualquier modo. Para ustedes somos ratas. Después quieren salir a hablar de plata, son todos unos gargas. Dicen tampoco tengo mientras pasean en coches de primera. Estás queriendo ver cómo puedes hacer para robarte todo, hacernos causa a nosotros de cualquier modo. Para ustedes somos ratas. Después quieren salir a hablar de plata, son todos unos gargas. Dicen tampoco tengo mientras pasean en coches de primera. Que les quede claro que esto se ve en todos lados. El Nahuel, DBA.
And we're back, Brunch and Budget. That was Cooperativa DVA with Politics. Yeah.
Politics. Okay, so we just got super excited during the song about, I'm like, Brunch and Budget needs to be a workers' co-op. Everyone needs to be a workers' co-op.
Everyone needs to be a workers' co-op.
Yeah.
Dialect is a workers' co-op. It's true.
Wait, is Dialect a workers' co-op, or does Dialect need to join a workers' co-op as a solo artist?
Both? Can we do both? I
Can
mean,
you do both?
Dialect is not really a solo artist. Like The Flash, Dialect is like a team.
Team dialect.
Yeah, you know, so I would say that we are a workers co-op, but we can be a co-op within a co-op section, right?
I love it. I want to kind of, I'm so sad we're almost out of time. I want to finish out the show with just, a lot of our listeners are POC, and a lot of them who freelance are really like trying to just like make it work, right? And so how can POC freelancers and small business owners really think about structuring their work, really think about structuring collectives, to advocate for themselves, to advocate for the people around them and their communities? Is it about joining a workers co-op? Is it about starting a workers co-op? Like, where can people start?
So we have a lot of resources between DAWI and the U.S. Federation. So first, I would start with doing your research. The U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives hosts a clinic every first Friday of the month that focuses on startup co-ops, how to start one, what it looked like, and answer any questions. Ajoke, you want to add to that?
Yeah, so I definitely would go to the clinic. I would also, if the person is you're a collective and you have extra funds, I would consider becoming a member of the Federation in order to get plugged in with other either individuals that are interested in starting a co-op in your region. And I would look locally to see if they're cooperative developers. Using our membership directory, you can find co-op developers in your region, like in your state or near you, that you can talk to and get more information about what would be needed in order to start a co-op with you and your friends.
And yeah, to Ajoke's point, so if you're in New York City, for example, there is the New York City Network of Worker Cooperatives, which is the local trade association that's connected to the U.S. Federation. And they have all these resources of worker co-ops that are out there in the city, as well as worker co-op developers, nonprofits that can support you in starting a worker cooperative business, as well as law clinics that can help you in the incorporation aspects. Also, for existing businesses, some people might already have existing LLCs or corporate business structures. There's an option to convert your business to worker ownership. Let's say you are just kind of, you've been grinding for 10 years and you're like, I'm out, and you still have like a team of people that, work for you or have worked for you in the past who want to take on the baton and keep it going. That's definitely an option as well. Democracy at Work Institute, we focus, a lot of our work as of late has focused on that kind of like business conversion to worker ownership. And then resources on both our websites, both the US Fed and on the DAWI website, of just like, businesses that already are existing that might be like in your wheelhouse, and you can like learn from case studies as well as templates and research on the worker cooperative field in your area or across the US.
I love it. I will say, I want to ask, because this all sounds great, and I also suddenly got really nervous.
What's your nervous?
I got really, because it's so different from how we've been taught business can be run, right? And I'm wondering
it's so not desperate. We're taught that business needs to be desperate.
Yeah.
You're clawing for every inch, even if you have our mile already.
And it's always been either or. Either I own the business or either I work for someone, right? And the idea of having it be both and getting both, it just, that was my next instinct. I was like, wow, this sounds great. I can't wait to look at the website. I can't wait to go to the First Friday clinics and reach out to like the New York Network of Worker Co-ops. We're in Brooklyn, so that's amazing.
What is it? What makes you nervous about it?
Yeah, I guess it's just like changing everything up, but the idea of like explaining to like my current employees, for instance, right? Like, hey, we might change to this structure. What does that mean? What kind of change does that entail?
Is it that you're afraid of letting go? Is that kind of part of it?
Possibly.
Because I think that like we're in capitalism, we're always fighting for ours.
Yeah.
And when you have a little bit, like there's that like the petite bourgeoisie they talk about, where like you got a little bit of capital, you own a little something, but you still feel like you're fighting for stuff. Yeah. And I think that's the group who is like can make a lot of change but are afraid to.
Right. Well, and especially like whether or not you have employees, like being a solo freelancer, like, having spent so much time building up your thing and having it feel like yours. And the idea of individualism is so ingrained in our culture in this country too. Like, how do you shift your thinking into like, oh, the collective is better. I know theoretically it's better. I know emotionally and mentally and work-wise it's better. But I've been taught my whole life to like be an individual, right? I've been taught my whole life to like, you know, do my own thing.
Is it that hard? I wonder.
I don't know. I'm curious if y'all have run into any like pushback and how you respond to that.
I would say that it's a both and, you know, like there is the idea that we should be such an individual, which ultimately is super unhealthy and leads to being like narcissistic and sociopathic. And you see all these like, you know, those qualities are the qualities that make people successful in the corporate world, that's problematic into itself. In co-op spaces, it's about, you know, it's about unlearning and reprogramming, reframing yourself as just kind of like, I'm a person, I am an individual, yes, and also I'm part of something bigger. I think like you see that in like with hip hop collectives, right? Like every single artist has their own thing going on. They have their own talent, they have their own flow, they have their own shtick at times. But they're also part of like a larger collective that can really like elevate everybody. And that's the idea with a cooperative, is that like you can be your own person, you can do your thing, and also you're part of an organism that is more powerful as a whole.
Yeah, no, that especially when you talk about the hip hop collective thing, it makes me think about like one way that you can think about it is actually taking a burden off of you. You know, rather than feeling the need to say, because, you know, even if it's a collective of rappers where we're all the same element, we all have different things that we talk about that are important to us. And rather than bearing the burden of taking every subject matter, and every vibe and every style on, I can just say my sentence and then we build that paragraph together. And I can trust, because I've already rocked with these guys, that they're going to be able to help build something cohesive. And I can just do my part and be kind of a cog in a wheel and also get the benefits of person on the act.
And also adding to that, I immediately thought of the phrase like many hands make light work. So you get to, part of letting go means you get to focus more on what's important to you in a cooperative, but then also do better and bigger things. And yes, there is some fear. I'm not so much involved with conversions, but I have watched a couple of co-ops start from no business entity to a new one. And there's mostly fear about assuming the new responsibility, being able to have time, being equipped to make the governance decision. But like we were saying in the beginning, that's why it's really important to do your research, make sure you know what's out there. What are your resources? What are tools? What's been done before? So you're not starting from scratch.
Right. We don't have to make it up. That's the thing. It's been happening. I love it. Oh my gosh, we are out of time. This was amazing. We learned so much. Thank you both so much for joining us. Ajoke Williams, Project Manager of Gilded with the U.S. Federation for Worker Cooperatives, and Anh-Thu Nguyen, the Director of Strategic Partnerships at the Democracy at Work Institute. Thank you so, so much for joining us.
Can we shout out the website?
Yes, please. How can we find you?
Yeah, so the U.S. Federation is at usworker.coop, and DAWI is
institute.coop, which is COOP.
COOP, Scoop, yes. No, that's really great and refreshing, and it feels really good to know that we can do this together, and we can take these burdens off our back, and we can let it go. Co-ops never bothered me anyway. And we're going to leave you guys with one last joint, staying outside of the States. We're going to Australia for an artist named EYEI with their song Workers United Will Overcome. And it starts off, just to give you a preview, with that classic workers chant, Workers United Will Never Be Defeated. And we'll check y'all next time. Brunch and Budget, part of the Waste and Wealth Podcast Network. Peace.
Prosperity Now Summit.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody.
Hey, I hope you're having a good time at the summit. Keep on summiting.
Woo.
If you act like there's no possibility of social change for the better, you guarantee there will be no social change for the better.
Workers united, never be defeated. Workers united, will overcome. Workers united, never be defeated. Workers united, will overcome. Workers united, never be defeated.
We are the people who make things run.
Workers united, never be cheated.
Protect your rights that were hard fought and won.
autonomy. We are the engines of the economy. Those who are poor
Are in a minority.
shout, let it out, cause we want equality. You can make a difference to help fix the world. All you have to do is believe in yourself. We celebrate our great diversity. This is the strength of worker solidarity. Workers united, never be defeated.
We are the people who make things run.
Workers united, never be cheated.
Protect your rights that were hard-fought and won.
Stand up. Stand up. We feel the pain of workplace injury. Bosses who think our lives are cheap, make them feel the pain of worker solidarity. Stand up, unite, don't turn your cheek. Fight for the right for fair compensation. Fight for the right for better education. Equality, dignity, justice for all. We want it now and we'll have it all. Power to the people,
Not to corporations.
boot politicians.
Trash our nation.
Fight for the right for self-determination. Help put an end to casualisation. Stand up and fight to return job security. Each to the need, from each their ability. Don't let them chip away our civil liberties. Fight with the power of workers' unity. Workers united, never be defeated. We are the people who make things run.
We are the people who make things run.
Workers united, never be cheated.
Workers united, never be cheated.
Protect your rights that were hard fought and won. Workers united,
We are the people
never be defeated. Workers united, will overcome.
who overcome.
Workers united,
We are the people
never be defeated. Workers united, will overcome.
overcome.
Stand up,
We are the people
stand up, stand up,
We are the people
stand up.
Today, many thousands of workers coming off jobs, stopping work to come down and protest the fact that ordinary people are not being given a say in their future.